for our own for our purposes, so that when we continue the series, we can have an idea of how this all went.
Sure.
So I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining the conversation about breaking the bias and International Women's Day. It's great to see everyone here. So imagine a gender equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that's diverse, equitable, and inclusive. A world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, we can forge women's equality. Collectively, we can all break the bias, celebrate women's achievements, raise awareness against bias, and take action for equality. The International Women's Day has missions on specific areas that need attention. Today, we're going to focus on the work mission to forge inclusive work cultures where women's careers thrive and their achievements are celebrated. I was a young woman in the 60s and realized early on that I needed to learn how to be self-reliant and resourceful. It was the time of a lot of unrest and protest and a time for real change for women's rights. I'm a small business advocate, a local guide, and a resource and team leader of the Cafe Residential team at McGrath Realty. My name is Elisa Bruno Medilli, and I empower and educate others to be their very best. So we all have a story, and we all are resilient, brilliant, optimistic, multi-talented human beings, and I hope you become inspired by today's conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Judy Mackinac. We put this presentation together because we were really passionate about raising awareness for and about women's issues. Judy will introduce our panelists for today.
Thank you, Elisa, and welcome to everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I think, to Elisa's point, we're so excited to be doing this today. It's an important topic at all times, but especially during Women's History Month and on International Women's Day. I think when we talk about break the bias, especially in the world that we're living in today, there's so many biases, conscious and unconscious. And I think it's just wonderful that we're able to have this conversation. Also, I just think it's very timely that the theme for Women's History Month is women providing healing, promoting hope, which again, I think is just so sorely needed right now. And so when we were pulling our panel together, it was important that we had, women who could help us really not only tell their stories, which are remarkable in and of themselves, but in addition to just talking about the opportunities we have in breaking biases and gender equality, just, have a forum that we can all learn from each other. So hopefully, we will all be able to do that. So I'm just going to start by introducing these three wonderful women. First, Brigette Mcfarland. So Brigette, and actually I should just back up for 1 second and maybe tell you a little bit about myself. So I've been in the financial services industry for 30 years, even though I like to tell people I'm still 27. I indeed have been in this industry for quite a while. And I lost my husband, became a young widow almost 10 years ago now. And 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to leave my successful career on Wall Street to take over his practice, where I felt that I could help other women in particular really be prepared for life's unexpected events. And as a mom, as a professional, as a woman, as an advisor, really be able to use my expertise to help those in my local community. And it has been really extremely rewarding. And I get to meet remarkable people along the way, like the women who are joining us today. So Brigette Mcfarland also came from a corporate background for many years was a senior leader at major corporations. She's an innovative problem solver with proven ability to develop and lead high-performing global teams in the creation, management, and marketing of patent-awarded financial and digital products. Think MasterCard. She has spearheaded the delivery of B2B and B2C business solutions across payments, insurance, wireless, and wealth management industries. And again, is just really a shining example of someone who has been able to take her skills and now pay it forward by being a consultant for SCORE, which for those of you who may not be familiar with the organization, she is mentoring as part of Small Business Association and really helping women get started and coach and consult for small business owners. And we also are joined by Mimi Whelan Tisfai, who came here from Ethiopia in 1995 with $5, right? Let's think about that for a second. For any of you who have been lucky enough to frequent her coffee shop in Mount Kisco, you know it is an amazing place, not just for the delicious coffee and innovative, healthy, organic, and gluten-free food, but truly you feel at home there. It is so welcoming. And she is a successful business owner and community leader in our area, and she's forged the path for many young women entrepreneurs, including women of color. And then last but not least, a woman who I have had the good fortune to work with frequently, Lauren Ania. So Lauren is an upcoming superstar in the legal world. She is an associate at Ania, Scanlon and Siriano. She concentrates her practice on wills, trusts, and estates. And so for those of you who are looking and can see Lauren, she is a young, vibrant mom who, again, really understands and is passionate about educating people, being prepared and having all of those documents in place and having a plan in place is not for old people. So you're never too young, you're never too old. And it's great having her as part of this conversation because even though she's not an entrepreneur, she is forging her own practice within an established office, which, by the way, has largely been men. So interested to hear her perspective in the clients she works with and how she's helping to break the bias and transcend even within that organization. So that leads us into our first topic, which is, as we all know, gender balance is not solely a woman's issue, but it's an economic issue as well. And Mimi, again, so admire everything that you've done. So for a woman who came to this country with $5 in your pocket, what are your thoughts on that as an economic issue?
Hi, everyone. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thanks for having me. I think it's very important. It's everybody's issue. We all, understand how it is to be and do a job that a male will do, but not get paid for it the same or get treated in the same way. My job, when I had the restaurant also, is very male dominated, and I go to places that's all, a lot of restaurants are run by male, and but I think we can all do it. It's not a impossible thing to do. But I also see a big difference in a lot of people, supporting and helping women become, what we can do.
And I think that's an important point, that it's women helping other women. And for sure, there are men who are doing that too. And I don't want to lose sight of that. But women having experienced this, and I work with women all the time who are at a planning disadvantage, right? If you've left the workforce to take care of young children, or elderly parents or sick parents, and you leave the workforce and come back, you've lost that opportunity to either save within an employer plan or put away for yourself, right? And you've already likely been at a disadvantage because you're earning 70 cents on the dollar. So these are all things that we really can be helping each other with. So Elisa, I don't know if you have.
Why don't we, that's great. Thank you, Mimi and Judy. So Brigette, I want to give each panelist an opportunity to address that gender balance being an economic issue. Brigette, coming from that corporate environment, how do you feel about that statement about it being it's not just a woman's issue, but it's an economic issue?
It is definitely an economic issue that impacts us all. And I think that the more allies we can get from men as allies, then they'll also start to see that they will actually reap the benefit much more so than I think they are aware of, because they've been very familiar with kind of the status quo. But it's really, I think, important for that. There's some background noise. I don't know if
Yeah, I was just gonna, Veronica, I don't know where, if we can tell where that's coming from.
I think that it's taken care of.
Okay.
Well, that was just my contribution to that question, is that it's really making sure that we help men understand that we can actually drive revenue in a way that maybe, because of what they're used to in terms of their allies that tend to look like themselves, that we are actually key drivers of revenue as well.
It's an excellent point. And Lauren, being a young entrepreneur in today's male-dominated world of law, how have you been affected by an economic issue in what you do?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you for having me today, and welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here with all of you. And I can definitely speak, directly to that point and the point that Brigette mentioned at the end of her statements. So especially as an elder law attorney, I can recall going to surrogates court back when we actually went to court in person. And especially earlier on in my career, and when I was shadowing some of the attorneys, I'd sometimes be the only female in the room. Majority of elder law attorneys who did trust and estate work, handled people's estates after they passed away, were, to be blunt, older white men with briefcases. So it can be intimidating, but I really found it as an opportunity to bring a different perspective, which is what I've continued to do throughout the course of my career. I've found that from an economic perspective, a lot of my clients do wind up sometimes being women who are the driving force behind doing the planning for their family. At times, while men may be the person that brings in the funds or handles, having a job that might bring in a majority of the household income, perhaps, I've found that a lot of families rely on the female to ensure that that money stays there and budget and make a plan for future. So I think that that's something that needs to be kept at the front of our conversations, that a lot of our economic wealth and the ability for the family unit to continue has really been reliant on a female making sure of it. I mean, I can think back to my grandparents, who I'm fortunate enough they're still alive, that my grandfather worked in the elevator field. He used to be an elevator repairman, and he'd bring his paycheck home to his wife every week or month or whatever it was, and she'd take it and give him $50 back or whatever amount it was. And that's what he got, and she took care of everything else. So even from the home front, it's important to keep, in our thoughts that women's gender balance needs to be important, because the economic issue is that we've done a lot of the economics. We're behind a lot of the home economics in certain situations. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Lisa, I'd like to add something on to that,
Sure.
the comments that Lauren made, because I was asked to launch a new revenue stream at MasterCard, wealth management. And so did a lot of deep dive research. And the big aha moment was finding out that traditional brokerage firms were focusing on current wealth, not the big wealth that's going to be transferring over the next. And I see Judy shaking her head. Yes, you know where I'm going with this.
I do indeed.
Yes, yes. And underrepresented to the point where, looking at the different research studies, anywhere from 6 to 8% of women that have assets under management at traditional brokerage houses, and not realizing and recognizing exactly the point that Lauren made. Not only is wealth going to transfer from their parents, these women, we live longer. So the wealth that we're managing we're going to be managing it longer. And even the brokerage firms that are starting to understand that that's an underrepresented group, women and also millennials, they are starting to focus there. But it's really hard when the people who are managing, the financial advisors, they're focused on today, where they're getting percentages for managing portfolios, and they're not seeing the big dollars yet. And their average age is like 57. So they're going to be retiring soon anyway. So they're focusing on where they can generate their own personal compensation today. So I just wanted to say, Lauren, I've seen exactly what you're talking about. And I think that these more traditional brokerage firms are starting to wake up to it.
They working at one of them and having worked at several others, you are so spot on, Brigette, with that comment. I think the other challenge is, even though we do have a lot of men who are advocates, like, men think differently. Women do have unique challenges, and there are issues that really do need to be addressed, yet many of these firms are still run by men who have a particular vision, which is not necessarily holistic, right? And taking that full picture and looking forward, as you're saying, it is interesting. Our firm, Edward Jones, actually is run by a woman now. And so it is, and she's remarkable. So, and she came up through the ranks. So it is really refreshing to see that kind of, see that permeate. But yes, and to your point, by 2030, the majority of wealth is going to be held by women. And I think that having conversations like this, where we all play a part in educating women as to what their options are, right? And just helping them make informed decisions is really so critical. I'm wondering, just kind of segueing a little bit.
It segues right into our next point, I believe, which is, what is bias and how does it play out as far as advocacy, inclusive mindsets, and tangible actions where they're needed from everybody. So that is a great point. How do those things play out? And I know that Brigette is part of the diversity. Well, she leads the diversity, equity, and inclusion for the SCORE Small Business Mentorship Program. Maybe you can kind of talk about that a little bit, Brigette, because I know how passionate you are about that topic and about how you've been chosen to be the leader of that.
Yes, regionally chosen, but also chosen to be a member of the DEI Advisory Council that reports into our CEO. And our CEO for SCORE, as of maybe a year and a half now, is a woman. And that's major for SCORE because it is still predominantly male. In fact, we only have about 27% of the 10,000 mentors we have, only 27% are women. So imagine what she has walked into, right? But in terms of bias, the biggest challenge I think people have is understanding that we all have them. We literally all have biases. And when people think bias, they think racially, and it's not just racial. In fact, I will tell you within SCORE, our biggest challenges are gender biases, not racial biases. But the biggest challenge that people have is awareness that we all have them. It doesn't mean that you're prejudiced. It just means that we're all wired to make snap judgments. And those snap judgments are really based on, you can take it back to the Neanderthal days when it was fight or flight. It's like, it's this friend or foe, and you have to make that decision quickly. But because of those nanoseconds that goes by, we tend to compartmentalize and group people. And unfortunately, when we use those I'd say those shortcuts, we end up missing out on something that we really don't realize could be additive. It's letting someone into that tent that can get bigger. It doesn't mean you kick people out. It means you make the tent bigger. And I'd say in terms of advocacy, that's where we need men as allies to create that awareness when we're talking specifically gender bias, specifically since it's International Women's Day, the challenges that women deal with men having certain stereotypes about our leadership capabilities or our ability to actually multitask, take care of our families and lead an organization. We hear it, that there's a lot of comments that are still being made today about, well, that person should be home taking care of her family instead of being asked to take on this strategic initiative. So it still happens today, which shocks me. In terms of the tangible actions, I think that we all, this is stepping outside of just gender bias, just need to think before we speak. I know the way I was raised, there were certain sayings my family would have that I didn't think anything of. As I got older, I started thinking, that doesn't sound right. That's not politically correct. So I still catch myself with certain things. So as hard as I work on myself, I still know there's work to be done. And I think if we all kind of had that mindset that we're all a work in progress, we would actually think before we say things sometimes, or even write things, particularly in this day and age where the written word seems to be pretty divisive. What's being put in text messages, what's being put on Instagram. If more people would actually think, how is this going to be perceived, or is this targeting a certain group? I just think it would go a long way, just taking that half step to think before we do and say.
And if I could just jump, and I think that's amazing, and it mirrors what we're doing here. We have a pretty ambitious DEI initiative, which I'm also a regional leader, but I think it's also recognizing that we don't know what we don't know. And I keep hearing my parents, like, until you walked in somebody else's shoes. And I think it's just recognizing that we all do come from different backgrounds. Everybody has something to offer. And Brigette, to your point, you can't jump to conclusions, right? It's really important that you really be open to learning and understanding that there are all kinds of diverse experiences and capabilities and expertise that people bring to the table. And Mimi, if I could just ask, I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic, because you are in a tough industry too.
Right. And Mimi told me a story the other day when I had a conversation with her. So, she's faced some of that bias as well.
Yeah. No, I do see it every day, more than once sometimes. People walk in and nobody really expects me to be the owner. They would ask either the male, that's working behind the counter, or even my nephew who's 17, they've asked him if he is the owner. And on the other end, and I do see a lot of people bringing their kids and making sure that they know that I'm the owner. They would introduce me to the kids. So I think there is a lot of people who really want to change that, and they want to make sure that these kids grow up seeing whether a Black business owner or a women business owner or a young business owner. So there is a lot of people that are trying to make a change in that. But yeah, even when I had the restaurant, even though it was an Ethiopian restaurant, I think for anybody that knows it, Ethiopia being in Africa, they would at least think I'm the owner. My husband is not from Africa, but he was helping me at the beginning, and everyone thought he was the owner. And he would always just laugh and says, no, I'm not. I have nothing to do with it. This is all her. I'm just here to help her. But I think, I don't know, it's because people just don't see it often enough that they just automatically assume that I cannot be the owner. I really don't know what the reason is. I could say I have a lot of different reasons why they think I'm not. But yeah, and I see it every day. People that will come here for a few months and not realize that I am Mimi. And I think having the place after myself now, when somebody says Mimi, they have this whole reaction like, wait, you Mimi, you own this place, you're the Mimi, and they just get very surprised. And I hope that changes. I think it will. I'm very hopeful it will, because I do see it, that people trying to make sure that people know that I am the owner.
So Mimi, you have I'm sorry, Judy, you have a very unique perspective on all of this, because you are customer facing retail, which, the rest of the panelists are not. So you see the public, and they're making assumptions, or their biases, or, they're just not aware that, that they shouldn't, have preconceived notions about what an owner should look like. I mean,
And that's really what it is. They just assume, and like Brigitte was saying, it's really not about being racist. They don't even think about it, that
right.
It's possible, that it's already assumed as they walk in the place, it's someone else, and not a woman, and not a Black woman. And it's just, yeah, but I do see that it would really change. I'm hopeful that, in the next 20 years, this would be something that we'll be talking about,
Hopefully. And I think it's really one person at a time. But the other thing that I marvel at, and I'm just curious to hear your perspective. You obviously take a very thoughtful approach to the type of, you're not just a businesswoman, right? Like you, it's very different walking into your establishment than a Starbucks. So and nothing against Starbucks, but you take a very thoughtful approach to what you want that environment to be like, whether it's the type of coffee people are drinking, the type of food the type of people you're trying to attract. How does that work? How do you do that?
When it comes to having a coffee shop, it's been my dream for a very long time. And I always imagined it and had a vision in my head, but I really didn't know how it was going to be able to come out. And everything I have in this place came one by one. I opened it with really bare minimum. And every time I saw something that I thought would reflect my idea and my value, I added on. But I think it's really like who I am. I want people to be able to eat something healthy. I want to be able to be open to anyone that is interested in whether it's gluten-free or vegan or a healthy snack, a clean place to sit and work, or a clean place for people to meet. I make sure I'm here almost every day. I do have a day off, but just make sure that people are welcome and invited, and the service is good. And I'm very lucky in having people that just come in, when it comes to people working here, I always look at the personality, not the experience, because I can train someone to make a good coffee, but I can't train them to be have certain type of personality. So I just, try to focus on those things. And I did set out to be very different than Starbucks, because the type of coffee they have is not what I wanted to serve to people. I think there's a lot more option when it comes to coffee for people to have and to drink. But it's just been my long dream, so I want to do it well, and I want to make sure people enjoy it.
Well, you're doing an amazing job, and we're very grateful you have. So
Yeah, and I see that there are a lot of comments in the chat, and Carol is at your place right now, waiting for her. And yes, it is a warm, safe place with great food and coffee. So there is some comments, and if anybody does have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll talk later about them, because I see that
Elisa,
yeah.
if I might, before we move to the next topic, I put something else in the chat that I think would be interesting for folks to look at when you have time. One is a coworker experience, and this is around bias. Very interesting. It's literally 3 minutes. I'm not going to show it here, but when you have time, I suggest it. And the other is a Vroom commercial that they've been showing that I think is amazing. But it's the puppet husband. It shows the woman talking, and she's not getting the support from the salesperson. I can see Veronica has seen it. She's smiling. That's another one. And then the other are these UKG commercials that also talk about bias and equal pay for women. So those are just 3 things I put in the chat. I just wanted to point folks to, so that later when you have some time, it's just real short little snippets, but it shows that companies are starting to focus that there is an issue, and they're trying to bring it to the forefront on different platforms.
If I could just add to Mimi's comments as well. So Mimi, I really admire the approach that you take with your business. And I think that that's one of the differences between male-owned businesses, female-owned businesses, is this personal touch that's sort of added to it. And I don't think that we, I don't even think that we intend or try to do it. It's just part of our nature. But something you said was, you can teach someone how to make coffee, but you can't change their personality. And when I do any hiring for my firm, I wind up taking a very similar approach. I don't always look for someone who's been a paralegal, worked at a law firm, knows what type of law we practice. I look for their other skills, and when speaking with them, whether or not they're someone I'd like to work with on a day-to-day basis. And I feel like if I had a male counterpart, at some points, they might not look at the resume the same way I do. So I think having a female perspective is very unique to the workforce, to hiring, to having those type of more personal relationships that you're able to foster and bring in a warm, welcoming place that might not otherwise be. So I think that's wonderful.
It is. And I think it points out 2 other things that I think everybody, has in common on this panel, is that one, you have the self-confidence, right? Like, you believe in yourself and you're not going to let anybody dictate who you are. And then it's your values, right? It's your values-based. Mimi built this business based on her personal values. And again, we see that increasingly. I've seen it a couple times, but this time even more so, values-based investing, right? People want to be involved with people or invest where they know that companies are aligned with their own personal values, right? And that is so important. I graduated from a women's college. I went to work on the bond desk at Shearson American Express. I was a French literature major. And again, somebody hired me because of my ability to learn, not that I knew corporate bonds. And he said the exact same thing. I can teach you corporate bonds. I can't teach you everything else, but never occurred to me never occurred to me that I was walking into an all male situation. and I couldn't do it. So kudos to all of you for like forging the path to help other young women do that.
Right. And Lauren's point about, different perspectives, even from an age perspective, Lauren, you are at a point where you need to have credibility because you are 30. Oop. Was I supposed to say that?
She's
But
older than
Cat's out of the bag.
27.
and Veronica on this call as well. You're part of a generation that sees things differently, and we need to remove that bias as well, because there's a generational bias,
Yes.
as well as all the other biases that we have. And again, we're here to help people become aware of them. So thank you everybody for contributing to that point. And I think we have another topic. If are we good with this one, everyone? Everybody kind of contributed, and I think all of the contributions are great. But the one thing we did want to mention is, how has the pandemic mentality changed things and changed your outlook or value of your role in your business? Now, this doesn't necessarily pertain to bias, but there has been extra challenges and just so much more that's been added to our daily lives and our businesses that we've been affected by. So Lauren, this was one of the questions that one of the topics that you said that was important to you.
Yep, for sure. And I'm going to bring it back to something Brigette said earlier, was sometimes, women can be put into boxes. I think, Brigette, you had said something about women having to, do things at the home, take care of the home, things like that, and expecting us to do that. And what I found during the pandemic is that as a business professional, having other women that I work with who are also mothers, we were expected to do it all and do it all well and do it all within 24 hours. So the pandemic has definitely changed things and my outlook. I'd say from a business perspective, and as a lawyer, we have always been a step behind when it comes to technology, just as a profession in general. So transitioning into a very virtual-based platform did have its struggles. Luckily and fortunately, I had already put us on a cloud-based software. I had certain things in place for us to seamlessly transition, which I think does go towards my age in a certain way, where I was able to do things more quickly. I remember, and I was just telling someone about this last night, where the first week everyone was doing Facebook Lives, and my father has never been on Facebook. I work with my father. It's a family-owned business that we have. And I'm sitting outside of his door and I'm like, Dad, we got to do a Facebook Live. You have to talk to the clients. This is the only way to contact them. You got to do it. And he's like, I don't even know what that means, but okay. So I sit him in front of the new camera that we just installed, and I'm sitting outside of his office at home, and I'm like, please work. And I'm sitting there with 3 different phones, making sure that it doesn't get screwed up, and we were able to make it through. But we needed different generations. We needed different levels of understanding. We needed both female, male perspective. Everyone had to work together during the pandemic. And I think it's bringing us to a better place in our world where we can rely on this interdependency, interrelationship, this ability for us to work together to get the job done, which is really what we've done during the past 2.5 years, is we've got the job done. We're still standing. We're still all flourishing business owners. We've been able to make it through. I could talk on this for a very long time, so I'm going to give a few more comments and then turn it over. I think from a perspective position, the pandemic also allowed us to focus more on what is most important. It forced us to. It forced us to think more about our health, to think about our family, to think about the time that we were not able to spend with those individuals, and hopefully allowed us to create a little bit more work-life balance where you're spending time with your family. Now, I found that during the pandemic, that also became increasingly difficult as we became very connected with each other, even though we weren't in the office. I found myself working, I'd say, longer hours now and after the pandemic started than ever before. But I think it put things into perspective more as to what should be more important. And hopefully we will be able to get back to having those more family gatherings in the coming months.
Great.
I'd like to add something to that.
Please.
Too. Yeah. So one of the clients that we have at SCORE, a very accomplished woman, her name is Elaine Fluker. And she's been featured on Today, CNN, Forbes, Nightline. She has 100+ podcasts. Her name is Elaine Fluker. I want to give a shout out to her because she has just released a book called Get Over, I've Got It. And I think that that really pertains to what we're talking about right here. And it's about accepting support, that you don't get, kudos for always being the one to try and save the day. It's really for being able to save the day and yourself too. So just wanted to give a shout out. She's amazing. And she came to SCORE. We don't just work with entrepreneurs, but even people with existing businesses. And she wants to start to be able to take that message into corporate America to help. And I like the term she used, unapologetically ambitious women.
I
So,
love that.
right.
That's amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Get over, I've got it.
And it does make me think, like, we're always telling, our clients and our female clients, it's like when you get on the airplane and they tell you in case of an emergency, put your own oxygen mask on first. We are so bad at that, right? Like, how are we ever, Lauren is a young mom, how is she ever going to take care of her daughter if she's not taking care of herself? How am I going to take care of my clients if I'm not here to do that, right? But we are so bad at that. We need the reminders. Put your own oxygen mask on first. And by the way, someone put in the chat, thank you so much for this. Together we are better, which I think is the whole purpose of this event, right? It takes a village. It takes a village, and we are so much better together.
right.
Yeah.
And I see that Marianne is commenting that self-care is not selfish, and that's something that we did not mention here, but that is a really, really extremely important part of what we do on a daily basis. And again, if we cannot help ourselves and if we cannot take care of ourselves, we cannot take care of anybody else, and we cannot be effective. So thank you for doing that, putting that in there, Marianne. Marianne is a wellness professional. So, after this session, I'm going to include the attendees and their businesses and all of that, so that we can all kind of share with each other.
That's wonderful. Mimi, I'm curious how you manage that balance, which we know every day looks a little different, but running a restaurant, how do you, any tips for us, how you try to take care of yourself to keep going?
It's very challenging. It's very hard, and I'm very bad at that. I always put my job and the quality of service and everything I do more before myself. And sometimes I feel very guilty because I'm not home as much to have enough time with my son and my husband. But I definitely pay attention to it on a daily basis. That's the one nice thing that was with COVID. I came to work a little later because we were opening later, and I closed a little bit earlier, so I was home earlier. So I did enjoy that very much. But now, not having a restaurant and just having a coffee shop, it is definitely a little bit easier. And that was what, one thing that happened. In certain ways it was good for me, in certain ways it was bad, with losing a restaurant because of COVID, because it was very, very challenging to manage both, and also the type of food I have, it wasn't really doing that well with takeout. But I think there's a lot of good things that came out of it, and there's a lot of sad things that came out of COVID. I hope we all learn how to take care of ourselves. I have to remind myself every day to do that. I always said, if I'm not there 8 o'clock in the morning, and if I'm there 9 o'clock, if I needed that hour for myself, everything is going to be okay. And most of the time it is. I just have to keep telling myself that.
Yep, we do those voices
Yeah.
in our head. And you have another family that you need to take care of, which I would imagine was stressful during COVID, your employees,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, very much. And until recently, that was another stress, and another thing I have to keep in mind is, number one, keeping them safe, and number two, making sure they're comfortable, whether people were wearing a mask or not. And I just constantly have to have conversation with them. I said, just do what works best for you, do what makes you feel comfortable, because I have to try to please both. I have to try to please the customers and also make sure that my employees are feeling comfortable and taken care of. But yeah, it was a juggling act almost on a daily basis. And yeah, you have somebody that doesn't feel comfortable that someone comes in the place without the mask, or whether it's a customer or another employee that didn't want to wear it. It was very challenging, but it all worked out. Here we are now that we don't have to wear it, and we all seems to be okay. And
Yep.
I'm very happy for that.
and we'll all be there to celebrate with you for sure. And if I could just go back to one of Lauren's comments that kind of goes back to how we started our conversation. Lauren, I have to say, one of the people that I really admire is your dad, right? So again, going back to, it takes all of us, and it's not just women. He honestly, for someone who for decades built a very established practice, he's the first one to say, this needs to look different today than it did before. And I'm like, he entrusts you to take it in a new direction. And I give him a lot of credit for that, because he doesn't have to, he didn't have to, but he, I feel like, is a great advocate for having a diverse practice, for having a diversity of thinking within the practice. So I just need to say that, because I think it's important.
And Judy, you're honestly spot on. So I've been very fortunate where I have not really ever in my firm where I work felt like my gender has impeded my ability to do anything, to bring in business, to speak with clients. I've never been belittled in that way. Sure, by clients, there's been situations where they've wanted to speak to a male, attorney. They've wanted to get that, I don't know, opinion or whatever it is. But within my workforce, between my employees and with the managing partner, who's my father, he's always sort of viewed us all very equally. And especially throughout the pandemic, when he was faced with situations that have never come up before, such as a lot of us having to manage not having childcare, having young kids at home, being able to be there for our clients and for our children all at the same time. And he's really, worked through that, because it was not something that I think any business owner was ready for. I mean, never in our situation has there, or never in our type of profession has there been a time where your receptionist has a 2-year-old sitting next to her while she's trying to answer the phones, other than if she had to bring her kid to work one day. Like, it wasn't a day-to-day thing. So being able to, work through that and have an understanding very quickly is something that I'm extremely proud of him for. I think that, as business owners in general, it was a very tough time to work through those challenges and understand, what commitment your employees could give you based on the constraints that we were given, and how you had to potentially change what your expectations were based on that. But he has always been very welcoming and encouraging of women in business. I mean, even in a lot of the organizations we're a part of, I still am in the minority when it comes to networking organizations. I was at an organization last night, the Italian American Forum that we have in White Plains, and I think I'm one of 4 or 5 female members. And I'm on the membership committee, and they've asked me to help, bring other women in. And I hope that there's an opportunity to do so, especially with women in business. But he's definitely never let the fact that I'm a female or anything hold me back.
Oh, it's fantastic, honestly.
Great. So we are at 7 more minutes left to this 1 hour conversation. And Judy, do you want to bring up one final topic, or we can go into a Q&A if anybody has?
Why don't we let folks just take yourselves off mute?
Right.
Actually,
I
oh,
would
go
love
ahead.
to hear.
Alex had asked a question in the chat, and I told her that we would wait until the end to go over it. Let me just find it here. Where is it? Here it is. So she asked.
I was just gonna, could she unmute herself and ask?
Yeah.
Or do you want
Sure,
to just
Alex,
Alex?
if she's available, there she is.
There she is. Oh, your video is not good.
I can read out her question if you
Okay,
want.
thank you.
Yeah, Alex, you're a little bit,
Yeah,
your
Lauren, if
connection's
you
not
have
good.
it.
The question that Alex had asked is, how have you addressed any gender-related imbalances in either your personal life or professional life? I don't know if I'm talking to her.
Well, Alex's video is not doing well.
Okay. How
ahead,
have you
Lauren.
addressed any gender-related imbalances in either your personal life or professional life with a male counterpart or a supervisor who has not addressed a situation? How did you start that conversation?
You know what's interesting? That question is exemplified in one of the links I sent. It says the one that's the coworker experience. Basically, male and female switch roles, and they in writing, in their written communications. And the difference was amazing. But then when they went to their manager to explain what happened when they did that, the manager said that it was a fluke, basically, that didn't want to accept the data. So the main thing, Alex, is addressing it. It's really being brave. And I know it's hard to just call someone out, but it's how you do it. You don't do it in anger. You don't do it in a way that you try and make it a learning opportunity for them instead of scolding. So it's really the how you do it. But if you don't do it, it'll keep happening. And that's the thing that I've learned, that if you let something go, it'll keep happening. And each time you'll become angrier at yourself for not dealing with it. And you'll become very dissatisfied with whatever the situation is, personally or professionally.
That's great. Thank you. There's a message here from Robin. It says, greetings from the Bar Association in Prince George's County, Maryland. Thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences. This information has no boundaries and it's so inspiring. And her name is Robin. So thank you
Robin.
for that.
Yes. And thank you.
Yeah, are there any other questions? If you want to unmute yourself, you can do that now.
I just wanted to make a statement, Nancy Scavati, and thank you so much for putting this together. Anything women, related, empowering women is always very, I feel like there's not enough of this. So thank you. I think the timing is excellent. And, Bridget said, we have to think before we speak. And then Judy said, you don't know what you don't know. So, I feel that sometimes you're kind of stuck in between, that you're afraid to say the wrong thing. But what I have been working on is and then Bridget also circled back to kind of you have to have those uncomfortable conversations. So also, I think having this sort of platform where women can share and feel confident and comfortable enough to share with other like-minded women, I think is very important. So I just wanted to say thank you. I thought this was overall a phenomenal event where you are giving a platform to women and creating a space where we're open to sharing from all different walks of life, backgrounds, businesses. It's not just, one industry. We can all connect and be on the same page, supporting one another. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
You know,
Nancy.
we're so grateful, you know, to have had the chance. And honestly, for me, I'm always so grateful to be able to meet new women. It's so inspirational. And, you know, I think to your point, Nancy, like women tend to, you know, in a situation, and I'm sure Brigette has 1,000 stories of this from her past life, but, you know, if there's, you know, a new position that is open, you know, if a woman, you know, a woman will hesitate if, you know, she has 95% of the qualities or the abilities or the qualifications for that job. She'll be like, oh, I'm not at 100%. I'm not going to apply. A male will have 50%, be like, oh, it's totally mine. So I think having, to your point, having a forum where we can also remind ourselves that we are capable people, and also there are just so many perspectives and you know, diverse backgrounds, and we all bring something to the table, male, female, but having that safe place that we can learn from each other and remind ourselves that there's so many opportunities and we got to keep going.
Yeah, and I just wanted to reach out to Stacy, who's on this call, who is also part of our SCORE mentorship team, and she is in a very male-dominated business. So Stacy, can you just explain some of the challenges that you have being a woman inspector?
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. I actually started my career 30 years ago in the male-dominated food industry. I was a chef. So I know, I hear you all and what it's like to start off like that and like claw your way through and make an effort to mentor women along the way so they could get to positions, higher positions. And I decided to pivot into home inspection because being another male-dominated business, I had sort of the knowledge of what it was going to be like and the thought process to make it a woman's world. So I actually, and my partner, it's female owned and operated 100%. And it's interesting, I have to tell you, when we first started, we were like, I don't think that we're going to promote the fact that we're female owned and operated, because that would probably be a negative in most people's world. You know, they're so used to, you know, I think Lauren said something like that too, like the predominantly 50-year-old men who are the home inspectors. So after year one, we both were like, you know what? That's a point of differentiation. Why are we so afraid to not, we're better than, you know, I mean, we have like the attention to detail. We have so much more going for us as women with, you know, our skills that we can promote. So we pulled the plug and now we advertise and are proud of the fact that we're female owned and operated. And it pleasantly, we're feeling that although we have some obstacles to get over, and it's really a lot of men, they're pretty open to the fact you know, even when men call, they're not thrown off. So being in the industry for, you know, male dominated businesses for so long, it's sort of refreshing, and we talk about it, and we have so much further to go, but we are coming along somehow that we're starting to be taken seriously for what we can, you know, what our skills are. And we're just as good, if not better in some ways. But, you know, and I'm proud to see that there's a lot of the men, like you ladies were saying, that we need the men as allies. And it's really nice to see that some of the men are taking us sort of, I don't want to say under their wing, but are promoting us as well. And so, you know, I just want to say it's because of things like this, and making everybody aware, and the men and the women, that we're strong enough to go into these businesses and succeed and bring other women along with us. And we have a long way to go, but we're getting there. And, you know, so thank you all for, you know, doing this and, making everybody stronger and more aware and giving us a platform to talk with each other. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacy. That was great. So there's anybody else that wants to add?
Well,
We can do
Lisa,
that.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
kind of align with Lauren in terms of the support that she has received from her father. I also
Sure.
came from a family, very patriotical family. My father had come from 12 kids. There were 9 boys, 3 girls. So, but he always said, you're as good as, if not better than anyone else. So when Stacy said that, that rang a chime. And my sister wanted to be a nurse, and he'd say, why be a nurse when you can be a doctor? She went on to become a corporate exec like me, but still at the time she was going down the physical therapy path. And I do think that having those strong male role models that are supportive and, call them allies, call them, supporters, it is important. And I'll make one last comment around this, and this is more racial. But when I think about, and I'm going to repeat something that someone else said that always stuck with me, that as African-American, if it weren't for the white abolitionists, we would still be in slavery, because just us saying we don't want to be a slave anymore wasn't enough. Just us saying enough is enough wasn't enough. We had to have allies, we had to have advocates, other people who said, this is not fair, this needs to change. So I just use that example because it's one that always rang true for me.
I think that's awesome. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I had a similar experience with my dad. He was always very supportive, similar comments, but it wasn't until he passed away that I knew that he had started the first microloan program for women in the state of Massachusetts with Bank of Boston. Wow. Never knew it, because he just very quietly always did what he knew was to be the right thing. And I and my sister had the luxury, of course, we didn't realize it at the time, of being brought up in that environment. But similarly, my husband was always my biggest advocate, and I had phenomenal managers, along the way. And I think giving credit there and, and acknowledging that is really important.
And thank you, Judy. All of the points here today were very relevant and very important. And, we are raising awareness by having this conversation and by continuing this conversation. And hopefully we have all inspired each other to, take it to the next level and to, just go out and understand and be aware of the biases, the, inclusiveness and everything else that we need to do to make it a more equal world and a more inclusive world.
Lisa,
So,
I'd like
yes.
to just point out one other thing. My friend, Dolores Plagnan's on, and she is a business owner as well in a male-dominated industry. She and her husband co-own an amazing design studio for stained glass. And there she is. You're on mute, and I did.
Dolores.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me. I've had a wonderful time this afternoon. What dynamic women. Very impressive.
Well, I'm sure you bring a women's touch to that studio, and they are not a small stained glass studio. They do cathedrals. So
wow, that's impressive.
Pretty major.
Okay, and I might have a topic for your next meeting then, which is basically how a husband-wife partnership, how women still want to step over me and deal with him instead. So might be something we need to dig deeper
I think
into.
you're right. I would love to talk to you more about that. It's fascinating, truly.
Really?
Yes, but that, that is one of the things I hope that as a group, all of us, we now have a new network of people that we can support and help and tap into, because that's what it's all about. And I know I'm very grateful to have been part of this and, to get to hear all these great stories.
Well, I want to thank Elisa and you, Judy, and Veronica for putting this together. It's been amazing. I said my hand will always be up for anything that supports women, but you guys did an amazing job. So I do hope you continue the series.
We will. Thank you, Brigette.
Well, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Well, thanks everyone for
Thank
joining the
you.
conversation. It's important, and we will have another discussion in our series, and perhaps we can have it live at Mimi's one day.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
and I will
See
be
you all
I
at
would love to.
Mimi's.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah.
See
It
you
would be
all at
great.
Mimi's.
Thank
Thank you,
Very
everyone.
good.
Be
All right.
well.
Thank
Have
you.
a great
Have a great
week.
day.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone, thank you.